Have you ever considered where life originated and the implications of it for your life? Today we're going to be discussing intelligent design and whether or not it's consistent with the laws of nature and the principles of science. We're going to consider this evidence at three levels. First, we're going to look at the cosmological level, then we'll narrow it down to the geological level, then we'll narrow it down even further to the biological level. So a bit of background information. One of the biggest debates and most consequential debates in our modern world is the debate between the naturalist origin theory of the Big Bang and evolution and the creationist origin theory of the whole universe being created by an intelligent being. The evolutionist standpoint has had growing popularity over the last few centuries after thousands of years of some form of theism. A substantial portion of people have moved over to old Earth and related things. When asked whether or not they believed God had involvement in the creation of humans, 24% of people said God had no involvement, which is up from 9% in 1980. So this is clearly a big issue today. And often it's presented as a dichotomy between scientific facts and unprovable religious faith. And today we're going to talk about why that's not necessarily the case. So the first area of evidence we're going to consider is the cosmological evidence. The standard naturalist explanation for the origin of the universe is the Big Bang theory that we all know about. All matter and energy was concentrated at a tiny point, and then it all expanded outward to create the universe as we know it today. And that originated, I believe, in 1927, so it's been around for about a century now. So the thing is, with any creation origin theory, nobody was there. So the only way we can figure out what happened is by looking at what we have today and reasoning backwards. And we'll talk more about that later in the implications of that. So either way, we're gonna have to take something by faith and reason backwards because we can't prove it either way. So one of the biggest arguments for an intelligent design of the universe is the orderly way that the universe works. So we've all learned these laws in school, even just basic ones like gravity. We all know that two objects attract each other based on their masses. We all know that light reflects off of objects, and it does so in a consistent way every single time. The universe operates according to very ordered laws. There's not chaos, there's order, and there's no reason that would be the case if everything originated spontaneously. It reflects the fact that there is an intelligent creator. Another one of the biggest arguments for intelligent design is the fine-tuning argument, which says that everything in the universe is so finely and closely tuned that it could not possibly have happened by chance. To give examples, all four fundamental forces of gravity, fundamental forces of the universe are governed by constants. And if those constants were switched even slightly, nothing could exist today. No chemical bonds would work, gravitational bonds wouldn't work, nothing would have been able to form if there were even slight differences, much less life in the universe as we know it today. And often the fine-tuning argument, people attempt to debunk it by saying that our universe is just one small universe in a multiverse that contains infinitely many universes. But the problem with that is that the fine-tuning argument still applies no matter what scale you go to. If you go up to a multiverse, well then the multiverse has to be finely tuned. If you go up to a multiverse, the same thing applies and it just keeps going. So you can't really escape the logic. The second body of evidence is the geological evidence. And this is really where the whole conflict with creationism began. As early as the 1500s, even Christians began to notice that geology and the fossil record didn't seem consistent with the creation narrative. And there's extensive evidence that seems to debunk the creation narrative. One example would be the sandstone formations in the Great Red Sandstone in Northern Europe. The sandstone is intermingled with aquatic sediment, and there's rust that could not have formed underwater, so it implies that over millions of years, the ocean receded and advanced, and the shoreline changed over time. And this is one of the weakest areas of creationist science. This is an area where it's difficult to explain creationism, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. The creationist explanation is flood geology. So the things that atheistic scientists say happened over hundreds of millions of years, creationists would explain by saying that the biblical flood deposited those things there. And this is can't explain everything properly. Our models right now are not very good, and they have holes in them. And it's important that we acknowledge this. But that doesn't mean that they're wrong in light of all the other compelling evidence. It just means that we need better models in the future. And the final area of evidence is the biological evidence. And this is probably some of the most important, it has very important implications for our lives, where we came from. All of our ethics, all of our laws, our entire society is built off of presuppositions that depend on where we came from. Our morality depends on where we came from. The value of human life depends on where we came from. And just like with the origin of the universe, we can only understand this if we don't think of a creator. We can only understand this by reasoning backwards. So either way, something is going to have to be accepted by faith. And the problem with the evolutionary explanation is that it commits the logical fallacy of begging the question. It assumes as a presupposition that there is no divine intervention, and then creates a model that works without divine intervention and uses that to prove that there is no creator. But of course, if you start off by saying that there's no creator, you're going to be able to make a model that predicts there's no creator. That logically that makes sense, but it commits a logical fallacy by using a presupposition to prove the presupposition. It's circular reasoning. So given that presupposition, evolution is actually a reasonable explanation for the origin of life, but it's a false presupposition. You can't prove that. So both our creationism and evolutionism are reasonable explanations, but creationism has fewer inconsistencies and fewer holes, because evolutionism, it still has many, many holes that can't be filled. Things like irreducible complexity is a big one. Things are so complex that they couldn't have originated on their own. So there's a large body of evidence that states that creationism is consistent with the facts, which is what we're concluding, that creationism is consistent with the scientific facts, and it might actually be more believable than naturalism. So it's important to note when talking about this that it is not a dichotomy of faith versus facts. No matter what you're doing, you're going to have to accept something by faith because nobody was there in the beginning. There are no eyewitness accounts. You have to look at the evidence and believe something that you can't prove by faith. And so I would urge you, if you're watching this, to consider these things further because they do have really big implications for your life. As C.S. Lewis famously said, if Christianity isn't true, then it's of no importance whatsoever. If it is true, then it's the most important thing in the universe. The only thing it cannot be is mildly important. So I'd urge you to think about these things and look into it further to come to a firmer conviction of what you believe. Thank you.